estar en los dos sitios a la vez, tendré que dejarlo aquí. Pero también os digo que os dejo en muy buenas manos porque nuestro siguiente protagonista es una de esas personas que, y pocas pueden decirlo, de alguna manera han cambiado el mundo gracias a su talento y gracias a su trabajo. Él es el fundador de una de las webs más visitadas del mundo. Ha sido incluido por la revista Time dentro de la lista de las 100 personas más influyentes del mundo y la revista Forbes lo ha catalogado como web celebridad. Además, es impulsor y defensor de una nueva forma de compartir y de reunir el conocimiento. Ha creado una fundación que se dedica básicamente a fomentar el crecimiento, el desarrollo y la distribución del contenido libre. Hay una frase que podríamos decir le define perfectamente. Imagina un mundo en el que cada uno de nosotros pueda tener acceso libre al conjunto del conocimiento humano en su propia lengua. Eso es lo que hacemos. Os podéis imaginar ya de quién estoy hablando, ¿no? Pues sí, del fundador de Wikipedia, Jimmy Wales.
Thank you. Let's see if I have any water. Well, hello. Well, I just got off a plane this morning from Florida, so I've had a bit of a dizzy day, but I just had 2 giant cups of coffee out back, so I hope this will be exciting and interesting. So they asked me to come here to talk about lessons for entrepreneurs, Wiki Future, lessons for entrepreneurs, talking about some of the things I've done in my career that you may find interesting and hopefully a little bit inspirational. And so I'm going to surprise you a little bit because whenever I talk about entrepreneurship, people expect that I'll come and mainly talk about success or secrets of success, but the first thing that I'm going to talk about, and the main thing I'm going to talk about, is failure. Jimmy Wales is good at it. One of the things about my career is that I've had a great many really bad ideas that I didn't know were bad ideas at the time. So I'm going to step you through a few of those that I hope you find interesting. So way back when, in 1996, I was at the very beginning of my career, and I lived in Chicago, and I worked downtown in Chicago in an office like many people do. And at the time, I had this really brilliant business idea. I was using the internet just as a consumer. The web was just getting started. There was a lot of excitement. And I noticed that people around me were using very inefficient ways to get their food at work. They would use a fax machine to send an order to a restaurant who would deliver it. They would call the restaurant, or they would send someone out to get food. And I realized all of this could be put on the internet. Now, obviously, today, in every big city, there's food services that do exactly this. But when I tried this, what was the result? Failure. Jimmy Wales is good at it. In 1996, restaurant owners looked at me like I was from Mars. When I went to them and I said, oh, you should put your menu on the internet, they would say, what are you talking about? What is the internet? And so it didn't really work out at that time. So then I had my next idea, which was for a search engine. The name of the search engine was 3 Apes. As you can see, the slogan was, type your search and the apes will find it. I mean, how could this not be a success? The brilliant business idea behind the site, though, was to use pay-per-click advertising, very much like AdWords. But I had an idea that there could be 2 ways to pay. I mean, I was just one guy, basically, working on doing programming at night, trying to build something interesting. And my idea was that people could pay for advertising on the site, but obviously not many people would want to do that because it didn't have any traffic yet. Or you could pay by sending traffic and earn credit. So it was encouraging people to link to the search engine. And if they would link to the search engine, they would earn credits, and then they could use those credits to advertise to the very people who they were sending. What was the result? Failure. Jimmy Wales is really good at it. Chinese spammers took over the site within 3 months. I was getting lots and lots of traffic from China. as they were trying to rack up credits to spend on advertising. I really have no idea what it was all about. I don't speak a word of Chinese, and at the time I had no really ability to think in really global terms. And so we just decided that it wasn't working and gave up on the project. So then I had a project called Nupedia. And again, my brilliant business idea for Nupedia was a free encyclopedia for everyone. Okay, this may sound a little bit familiar now. Written by experts. I hired a PhD in philosophy to design it. What was the result? Failure. Jimmy Wales is really good at it. The Nupedia project, which was this vision of a free encyclopedia, I spent $250,000 getting the first 12 articles written. Sometimes I joke that I keep these articles by my bed and read them every night so that someday I'll get my money's worth. But this was not working out. So then I had a really dumb idea. A free encyclopedia for everyone. I was really stuck on that concept. The idea is open up a website, let anybody edit it, have no advertising, no sane business plan of any kind. And what was the result? Success. Even Jimmy can do it sometimes. So Wikipedia obviously has become an enormous success. It's by most rankings, it's the number 5 most popular website in the world. It's changing the face of knowledge forever, and it's an inspirational story, the story of Wikipedia, and it takes me all around the world to meet great people. And so it's a bit exciting, and it's worth talking a little bit about Wikipedia and how it became successful and where we are today. So the original vision behind Wikipedia was for all of us to imagine a world in which every single person on the planet is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge, and that's what we're doing. What is Wikipedia? Well, everyone uses Wikipedia. Everyone knows Wikipedia. But my real question is, how many people here have edited Wikipedia? Not very many. Not very many. So a lot of times when people have just used Wikipedia, you type something in a search engine and you end up at Wikipedia reading something. You may not have all the ideas behind Wikipedia and how it works and what the philosophy is. So the basic concept of Wikipedia is that Wikipedia is a freely licensed encyclopedia written by thousands of volunteers from all around the world. So what is free access? When I say free access to the sum of all human knowledge, I say freely licensed. Well, what I mean here is free in the sense of open source software, software libre. In English, we don't really have 2 words for free as in no charge and free as in freedom of speech. We're talking here about freedom of speech more than free of charge. It is also free of charge, but the idea is for everything in Wikipedia, all of our work, it's released under a free license, meaning that you can copy it, modify it, redistribute it. You can redistribute modified versions, and you can do all of these things commercially or non-commercially. So when people are contributing to Wikipedia, they aren't just contributing to this one storehouse of knowledge, this one humanitarian project. They're contributing to something that can be reused by anyone for any purpose that they want. And that's a big part of our philosophy, is we want the knowledge to spread. We want people to be able to do whatever they want with it. What is the sum of all human knowledge? Well, this is really a concept about what Wikipedia is not. So Wikipedia is not an open free speech platform where anyone can post anything. Wikipedia is something very specific. It is an encyclopedia. So Wikipedia is not a textbook. Wikipedia is not a library. Wikipedia is not YouTube. So we don't have funny cat videos, for example. I love YouTube, but lots of things that belong in YouTube don't belong in Wikipedia. And our community is very strict about this, that we're writing an encyclopedia, that it should be high quality, it should be very well referenced, and that helps our community to decide things. Because we have a clear vision of what we're trying to build, a lot of arguments that people might otherwise have do have an easy answer. So our community, wonderful group of people. We've been working together now for 12 years. We've generated over 24 million articles across 285 different languages. Myself, I find this 285 number is a little bit optimistic. There are about 200 languages that have at least 1,000 articles, and those are the active versions of Wikipedia. Those last 85, they're very small. They're waiting for people to come and work on them. I don't consider them really fully launched yet. But we know that there's about 350 languages in the world that have at least 1 million speakers. So we actually have quite a ways to go. There are a lot of small languages that we don't cover very well yet, but that's all coming in the future. So one of the things that people, when I talk about language, people are always interested in different languages and how we are in different countries. And one of the most important, of course, is China. And China very famously censors the internet. They have a lot of censorship in China. And in fact, Wikipedia was completely banned in China for about 3 years. We've now been open in China for several years, but they still today, they filter certain pages out of Wikipedia. So what do they filter? They filter the usual things you would expect. Anything having to do with the question of Taiwanese independence. Anything currently having to do with Liu Xiaobo, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who's a democracy activist in China. Ai Weiwei, the artist who annoys the government there. They filter those pages. We don't cooperate in the censorship. That's one of our very strong principles, is we never cooperate with censors around the world. Quite famously, for a few years, Google was cooperating with the censorship in China, and it really cost them a lot of respect from people. Thank goodness they've now pulled out of China. But we've always tried to be rock solid, because we are a charity, and we have a fundamental purpose of free knowledge for everyone. And so a censorship of encyclopedic information is very contrary to our base principles. So we fight it in every chance that we can. So it's interesting, when I go around the world and we see, you know, Wikipedia is the number 5 website, and in China we're around number 50 because we were blocked for 3 years. You know, China's quite far behind in Wikipedia. I always like to say it that way because the Chinese government wants me to say that Wikipedia is far behind in China, but I always say, no, China's behind in Wikipedia and needs to work to catch up. But the interesting thing is, so I can go and speak. I've even spoken to university students in China who had not used Wikipedia, which is a mind-boggling thing to consider, because in every other country in the world, all university students are using Wikipedia without exception. But I have seen that we have had some kind of an impact on China in any way. Here's a menu from Beijing. It says Wikipedia fried with eggs. It's rather odd. Here's another one. Beef brisket in Wikipedia flavor. Someone sent me this and they said, Jimmy, what does this mean? And I emailed back and I said, I have no idea. But I said I could email I know who will know. I'll email the Chinese language Wikipedians in Beijing and I'll ask them. So I sent them an email and I said, what does this mean? And they wrote back and they said, Jimmy, we have no idea. All of these are different food items. There's the Wikipedia Bread Company. It's kind of like a Starbucks, nice bread. Stir-fried Wikipedia. So the only thing that we've been able to figure out is all of these menus started to appear around the time of the Olympics in Beijing. So this is, 4.5 years ago. These started appearing in restaurants across China, but particularly in Beijing and Shanghai. And we think, here's what happened. For the first time, a lot of restaurants in Beijing, there was going to be a huge influx of foreigners who came to see the Olympics. And so a lot of restaurants thought, oh, we need to translate our menu into English because all the foreigners are going to come and they're going to want to see the menu in English. And so they went and they typed, and of course anything you type in a search engine, what's the first thing you see? Wikipedia. So they say, how do you say this type of mushroom in English? Oh, Wikipedia. So I like it with spices myself, with pimentos. So anyway, I've decided that maybe we might not ever be in the top 5 websites in China, but maybe we could finally have a sane business model. We could open up a restaurant in China, maybe. So this is all fun, but another question that people have is, how does Wikipedia differ across different languages? And so the first thing to report is that the style of Wikipedia is very similar across all languages. There's that very dry, very straightforward, matter-of-fact style. Wikipedia entries tend to read in a certain way. The community is quite diligent about trying to use neutral language, try to describe things in a very balanced way. We're not perfect, of course, but we do try hard at that. And that ends up being very true all around the world. But there are differences in what people are reading that are interesting to look at, interesting to think about. And this is a small study we did a few years ago, looking at different languages and what was the most popular articles. So for the 100 top pages, what category were they in? And the languages here are English, Chinese, Japanese, French, German, Russian, and Spanish. As you can see, one of the first things that jumps out at people is the big green bar is the Japanese. The Japanese really love pop culture. And if you know anything about Japan, this makes perfect sense. The Japanese really do love pop culture. They love English pop culture, American pop culture, Japanese pop culture. It's a big part of everyday life in Japan. Magazines and so forth. It's something that the Japanese are really, really into. And so it's natural that their Wikipedia, they are doing a lot of reading, and they're reading about pop culture. Another thing to look at here is that the Germans are the most interested in geography. Not sure that's a good thing. I don't make that joke when I'm in Germany. And then finally, it's interesting to note that sex is among the top topics. This is no surprise to anyone. People are interested in human sexuality, and they go on the internet and they want to read things and learn things. But it's in the top topics everywhere but in French and Spanish. And this puzzled me for a while, and then someone explained it to me. They said it's because the French and the Spanish are actually having sex, and the rest of us are just reading about it on the internet. So, anyway, and the Russians are reading a lot about it on the internet, apparently. So anyway, this is all amusing, but it actually turns out when you look a little deeper at what people are reading in Wikipedia, some of the differences, when you really dig in, actually end up being similarities. So if you go and look, my favorite example page these days is Nick Clegg. Nick Clegg is the Deputy Prime Minister of the UK. So if you go and you look at the traffic statistics, who's reading the entry on Nick Clegg? It's mostly people in the UK. Because while David Cameron, the Prime Minister, would be known around the world and there would be news stories around the world, Nick Clegg is mainly known in the UK. He's not as much of a global figure. And you'll find in every country, you'll find whoever the president is might be read about everywhere, but the second person in charge would be not so popular in other places. So people read about their own local politicians. So even though they're reading about different people, in principle, it's the same thing. People like to know about things that matter in their own lives, and so a lot of the differences turn out to be similarities. So we've had enormous success. This is, I could almost say I'm announcing this today, but we actually put out the announcement about 2 or 3 days ago. We did the press release. For the first time, Wikipedia broke 500 million unique visitors in a month. So 500 million people every month are using Wikipedia. That's a staggering number of people. It's really astonishing, and it puts us, really in the top rank of websites. There are some who are bigger. Facebook is bigger, Google, but in general, there's almost no one who reaches as many people as Wikipedia does every day. And this raises some questions about Wikipedia. Who writes Wikipedia? It's a very important cultural issue. It's a part of the infrastructure of our world, and so we should be interested in who writes Wikipedia. Why? Well, here's one reason. This is a woman from Twitter. She's a school librarian who said, yesterday I asked one of my students if she knew what an encyclopedia is, and she said, is it something like Wikipedia? So I want you to think, Wikipedia is 12 years old today. So it's a little 12 and a half years old. And so if you think about a student who is 15, so a student who's 15, this means that Wikipedia has existed for the entire time that person has known how to read. And certainly, if you're 15, in the last 5 years, say from when you were 10, for the last 5 years, Wikipedia has been huge. And so for that generation, that next generation who's coming up, Wikipedia is just part of the world. It's always been there, as far as they can tell. For all of us in this room, we can remember a time before Wikipedia existed. And so it's something to really think about, that for the next generation coming up, Wikipedia is the source of information that's always been there, and it's really important then. We feel a really heavy responsibility to get it right. We want Wikipedia to be as good as it possibly can because the world relies on us. So by the numbers, our community is about 87% male. We're not happy about this number. It is something that we consider to be a problem. We have an average age of about 26. I don't consider that to be too much of a problem. Certainly, we have people much younger and we have people much older, but the average is 26. The typical Wikipedia volunteer who I meet is somebody who is just 25 to 35. They have a technical job typically. Not all of them, but many of them are computer scientists, computer geeks of various kinds. And And we have about double the percentage of PhDs relative to the general public. So that doesn't mean that Wikipedia is mostly written by PhDs. It just means we've got a lot of PhDs in our community, which is not surprising. Writing an encyclopedia is a very intellectual hobby, and a lot of people who are intellectuals are drawn to it. So here's one of the most remarkable things about us and our work, is that the Wikimedia Foundation is the nonprofit organization that owns and operates Wikipedia. I set up the Wikimedia Foundation several years ago, and the Wikimedia Foundation is a charity. We're a nonprofit, and we have just over 120 employees to assist in the work of 100,000 volunteers. So if you think about that, we're the number 5 website in the world, and we exist mainly by the work of volunteers, and the money that we get is mainly from donations from the general public. So it's a really remarkable thing. So when we think about this, the structure of this, it's very, very different from any traditional media source. You'll find nothing really like it anywhere in the world. So I always think it's important when we think about who the Wikipedians are, to show people and let you meet some of them. So I'm going to run a short video we made a couple years ago at one of our conferences. Every year we have a conference called Wikimania, and we bring together the community to discuss best practices, to discuss what's going on in all the different languages. And so from Wikimania, we had this video of some of our volunteers.
Knowledge, why you must keep it by yourself? You must share it. I think
I liked that the purpose of this website didn't say website, didn't say wiki, didn't say internet, it just said free knowledge for everyone in their own language.
When a community is open, it's really made of those who dare taking this invitation. And this is an invitation. Of course you don't have to take an invitation, but there is an invitation out there in an edit button to say, come be part. What you know is as important as what we know.
You know, you're giving education to people, and not just any people, but the whole of the world. So I feel great by contributing to an encyclopedia that is accessible to virtually everyone in the whole world.
It's just making yourself happy by helping others, that's it. Because I want to be happy, I help others. You're working together with so many different people from so many different cultures, and it's just amazing.
The thing about it, for me, what it's really about, it's just really sweet people. You know, we've got all these really sweet people who are just, they get online and they're typing, and instead of yelling at each other or just having a conversation or reading about gossip or whatever, they're trying to build something that everybody else will find useful. I just think it's really sweet, really nice people.
Right. So what next? So after Wikipedia started to become successful and was really ramping up, and I was very excited about that, well, I'm the kind of person as an entrepreneur that I always have another idea. And so then the next big concept that I worked on was a project called Wikia Search. The idea was to create a new search engine. When I announced it, it got an enormous amount of press coverage. This is the cover of a big business magazine in the US, Fast Company. It says, Google's worst nightmare. I'm not sure that's actually true, but my mother bought 10 copies of the magazine, so that was nice enough. And the Wikia Search was a different concept. It was all open source software, all freely licensed content, so really following in the mold of Wikipedia, very open. Let the users control the search results. People could add them, edit them, move them around, delete them. It was a really radical concept, but what was the result? Failure. Jimmy Wales is good at it. In this case, the project itself was actually going well. I was happy with the development of the software. I was happy with the small but growing community we had. But we realized to build a search engine is very expensive. We wanted to get it, our original plan was get it to a certain level and then go out and raise more money from venture capitalists to extend the work. And then the economic downturn happened, the crash, and suddenly the venture capitalists were absolutely not going to invest in anything, and it seemed insane to continue investing money in something when we didn't know if we would be able to raise money at the next stage. And so we were forced to close the project during the economic downturn. I still, in the back of my mind, have a tickle that someday I might give it a go again, but for now, it was a project that, although on certain merits it was working, it was at the wrong time. It was at a time when the economy wasn't suitable for it. And so that's unfortunate, but that's what happened. So still, I never give up. So the encyclopedia was the start, and the library is actually much, much bigger. And this is the concept behind going beyond Wikipedia into Wikia. So Wikia was the company that did Wikia Search, and we also were doing, allowing people to open wiki projects and start new wikis of any kind. And the real idea here was to build on the Wikipedia model, empower everybody to build the rest of the library, all of the other things that don't belong in an encyclopedia. We wanted to focus on making it easy to use and think about helping communities generate topics that would have good ad revenue. This is a for-profit business, not a charity. And what was the result? Success. Even Jimmy can do it a second time. Wikia is very successful. We have over 200,000 wiki communities. Primarily, we're in entertainment and in gaming, so TV shows, movies, video games. As an example, how many people know the TV show Lost? Yeah, quite a few people. I'm going to have to come up with a new example since the show is finished. How many of you actually understood the TV show Lost? There's usually one guy in the back who probably reads Lostpedia. So we had a site called Lostpedia that was, the community had generated 7,000 articles about the TV show Lost. So every single excruciating detail of this incredibly complicated and very interesting TV show. In fact, we found out, the head writer did an interview in a magazine, that the writers of the show used Lostpedia heavily. At one point, they were stumped about how they had made a reference to Canada. So what did they do? They looked it up in Lostpedia. So it was a really interesting collaboration between the fans of Lost, who were writing this incredibly detailed encyclopedia about the show, and the creators of the show who were reading that encyclopedia to understand what the fans thought. It's really a very fascinating kind of thing. So we now have about 71 million monthly visitors. We're ranked around number 35 on the internet. We're profitable. We're barely profitable because every time we increase our revenue, we invest more heavily in growth. So the site continues to grow very heavily. So it's doing really amazingly well. So what are some of the lessons that I've learned? This is sort of the crux of the talk here. And I think you'll be able to guess some of this. So one of them is fail faster. And I'm not the inventor of that phrase. I think it's very important. When I look back at a lot of these different projects that I did, some of them I spent far too long on, even after it became apparent that it wasn't going to work. And the reason was I got my ego tied up in a particular concept. So with the original lunch business, I spent much too much time on that. Even though I could tell immediately that it wasn't going to work, I thought in a few years, at some point, maybe it will work. And certainly had I continued, it might have become a success eventually, but it wasn't the right time for it. And I was too much tied up in that this is my project and this is going to be really big. Rather than step back and say, actually, this isn't working, I need to do something different. So fail faster is really important, that if something's not working, cut your losses and move on, change it, adapt it, pivot as quickly as possible. Because the truth is, real entrepreneurs fail and fail and fail. Generally, when you read the story of the career of an entrepreneur, 2 or 3 failures will be mentioned as a footnote, and then a long story about the success. And it's easy to get the idea that the long story of success is the only part of the story. But the true part of the story is the failures. And this is almost always the case. It's very, very rare that you have somebody like Mark Zuckerberg who, at age 12, no, I'm just kidding, but he was very, very young and became a massive success. That's typically not the path. There's typically some stumbles along the way, and even Mark Zuckerberg had a few little stumbles beforehand. So that is so crucially important, and I do think you should enjoy yourself along the way. Do things that you find passionate and interesting so that when you fail, you can say, look, the next 2 years are going to go by no matter what you do. If at the end of 2 years you did something that was cool and interesting and fun and it didn't work out in the end, at least you did something cool and interesting and fun. You could have been working at a bank and hating your life. So at least you end up having had something fun along the way. And in the end, I believe that you'll succeed if you just keep at it and are willing to adapt. And success can take many forms. And one of the things that's really interesting about Silicon Valley that I think we can learn from all around the world is that there is this very strong acceptance of failure. that in Silicon Valley you can start a business, and if it doesn't work out, people don't look down on you. People look up. They say, wow, yeah, you tried something, and that was good. And if your idea wasn't stupid, and if your execution wasn't horrible, but the timing wasn't right, or there's lots of reasons things don't work out that aren't the fault of the entrepreneur can raise money a second time, or the entrepreneur can get a good job at Google running something. I just mentioned Google, could be Yahoo, could be any of the big internet companies. And that's all completely accepted. And if we can get that in our heads around lots and lots and lots of different businesses in lots of different places, I think the world can be more innovative. Innovation is really stifled if people are so afraid of failing that the only thing they dare to do is get a job at a big company. That's not a recipe for innovation. That's a recipe for just continuing as we have at a time when the world desperately needs innovations. So what now? What next? And this is a little bit more of a speculative part of the talk, but I just wanted to throw out something that I've been thinking a lot about lately. I don't know what to do about it, but maybe somebody in this room knows what to do about it. And I think this is sort of my way of thinking about the world, is to think about what's coming next, what's coming soon, what's coming faster than people realize, that an entrepreneur today could look at and possibly do something interesting around. So I'm always talking, imagine a world in which every single person on the planet is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge. But for Wikipedia, that means people with internet access. I mean, we really mean every single person on the planet, but right now we don't have a way of reaching people without internet access. We hope that people, because everything's freely licensed, could print books or whatever, but a big thing that I keep my eye on is the growth of the internet in the developing world. And so here's what people know. If you go and you talk to people, just go to a party and say something about internet in Africa and mobile phones, people say, oh, I know, I read about this, that farmers, poor farmers can use SMS to find out where the best price for crops are, and then when they walk across town with their crops to sell them, they can cut out the middleman and they can keep from getting ripped off and they can make more money. This kind of story about the use of the internet in Africa, about the use of mobile technology in Africa, is true enough. That is going on, but I think it also clouds people's minds to what's really going on in the developing world around the internet technology. So here's what you probably don't know. This phone, which is my phone, which I think I have in my pocket. Well, it doesn't matter. It looks just like that. I'm just going to prove to you that I have a phone. This is an Android-based phone, so it has apps. The screen, it's small. It's smaller than your iPhone. The screen is not quite as good as your iPhone, but it's perfectly usable. I use it every day in London. It's my primary phone. And a friend of mine bought this phone for me in Kenya. It's unlocked, 3G phone, just slip any SIM card in and go, for $80. And that was over a year ago. Today, this phone is $50. You can buy this phone in Kenya for $50, unlocked 3G phone, and they have sold hundreds of thousands of them. This is just one brand of really cheap phones, really cheap smartphones with internet access that's being sold in Africa today. When we look at internet usage, let's look at another country, Nigeria. 0.1% of the country was online in the year 2000. By 2006, it had only increased to 3.1. So, percentage-wise, a big increase, but still very, very small. 16.1% by 2009. By 2011, 29%. And I expect by the time I get the next numbers, it's going to be 35 to 40%. So this is what happened to all of us, all of the Europe and the US 10, 15 years ago. That sudden surge when everybody got online is happening now in many African countries. Part of the reason is bandwidth. In January of 2002, 72 megabits per second is how much bandwidth they had. Now, just for comparison, I'm very fortunate. The U.S. does not have great broadband. It's pretty good, but it's not great. But I have Verizon Fios, which is fiber optic to my house in Florida. I have a 150 megabit connection at home, and it's amazing. But that's more than double what the entire country of Nigeria had in 2002. It's a remarkable thing. But that was 2002. Things have moved a lot. By 2007, 693. By the end of 2012, they had 12,000 megabits per second. And this is only continuing to increase. So things are really, really ramping up in terms of bandwidth. And what does that mean? That means that the price is dropping. So that people who can get a very inexpensive phone can also get a very inexpensive data plan. And one of the things we're doing at Wikipedia, we're working with various mobile carriers in the developing world on what we call Wikipedia Zero, which is doing deals with them so that they can offer Wikipedia to people with no data charges. So you get your 3G phone and you can get on Wikipedia and you don't have to worry about the data charges. We think that's very important as almost a human rights issue. The ability for people to learn using their mobile phone is incredibly powerful, particularly as we begin to reach the poorer and poorer people who traditionally have had very little access to information. This was a little bit of fun. I was in Lagos, Nigeria, and I tested my connection. As you can see, I got 9.33 megabits per second. My friend was sitting in New York City at the same time and got 8.38. So my connection in Nigeria was faster than New York City. Now, when I posted a tweet about this, some angry Nigerians said, "That's completely not true. The government is tricking you." Well, the truth is the government wasn't tricking me. It's just I was in a very expensive hotel for a conference that was very close to the internet access point. It is true. In Nigeria, don't come away with the idea that everybody in Nigeria has a 10 megabit connection to the internet. They don't. However, it exists there. It is coming there, and it's getting cheaper all the time, and it's going to have an enormous impact on the world. So then we come to the question, what are people doing? Are they searching for prices for crops? Are they reporting malaria outbreaks? That's another one you hear. Oh, yeah, they can report malaria outbreaks. Yeah, sure. Maybe they're doing that. But here's what people are really doing in Africa with the internet. They're on Google, Facebook, Twitter, Wikipedia, local newspapers. This is what people do when they get online. And what's interesting about this, and what I think is really important, is that when we think about technology, when we think about the boom in technology, the boom in this continent of 1 billion people all coming online for the first time, if we're thinking in that alien way about very poor foreign people who live lives we can't even understand, we're missing the point, which is the story of the internet in Africa is that real and usable internet access is becoming available to millions of people today. And if you think forward 20 years, and possibly even 5 or 10 years, it's coming faster than people realize. It will be massive connectivity to the real internet for hundreds of millions of people. By the way, we can't assume that they speak French or English, which is what you traditionally would assume about anybody with a computer in Africa, if they're in Francophone Africa, or maybe some Portuguese speakers. But in general, they're speaking local languages, and they're getting on Facebook and Twitter, and they're doing all the normal things that we do. And I think that's a really enormous and interesting thing. And I think there are going to be all kinds of opportunities in terms of connecting people, in terms of, one of the really exciting things I've seen in Nigeria is a tech hub, a hub of young entrepreneurs there who are working on creating apps. And if you think about, something like Instagram, where it was a team of 13 who sold for $1 billion, that's astonishing anywhere in the world. But now think about a team of 13 who manages to make $500,000. Well, that's not such a great story if you're a Stanford graduate living in California. That's a pretty amazing story if you're a kid in Nigeria. That's pretty remarkable, and I think we're going to see a lot of those kinds of stories. So finally, I'm going to close with one more little fun video of some Wikipedia volunteers, and then we've got time for Q&A about anything you want.
I don't have superpowers at all. No. You could totally do it.
I pushed the button and saved the text. Woo! It was exciting.
You just changed Wikipedia. You just added your own contribution to Wikipedia.
I read an article in The Guardian about this online encyclopedia which everybody can contribute to, and I thought, whoa, maybe I can contribute too as well.
I edited the first time and I think I got addicted to it. I don't get paid anything. I just do it for, something to do in my free time, that's it.
You may start doing it for an idea because you believe in it, but you end up with friends, you end up with lovers, you end up with wonderful discussions, you end up with new ideas, you end up with the new books you're going to write.
You're not writing the article alone. You write a piece and somebody else goes like, hey, I have more, and together you can create articles that are pages long, which you can't by yourself.
Then you have success. You always see, okay, what I've done was successful, and this is great because so editing is a great feeling every time you do it.
as I say, when I read about Wikipedia, I decided that this is maybe where I would fit in, and I did.
Great. All right, thank you. So we've got time for questions. I don't know, is there a microphone in the audience? Or if there's not, do you know? Microphone for the audience? Yes, it will appear momentarily, perhaps. In the meantime, we can get started and just shout your question. I can repeat it for everyone. And actually, if someone could bring me water, that would be lovely. Okay, super. So who's got a question? Here we go.
You didn't say anything about the business model.
About the business model. So the business model for Wikipedia, we are a charity, a nonprofit organization. We primarily exist from small donors, the donations of ordinary internet users. The typical donation is, say, 30 to 50 euros. That's the backbone of the money that we get. We do have some larger grants from individuals or from foundations, but that is a kind of on the side. The real core money is from the fundraiser, from the general public. Now, what's interesting about that, that is sort of the remarkable new piece of information, is that traditionally every year we do a fundraiser at the end of the year. So in November, December, we put banners up on the site. Probably most people have seen them. And for the first few years, we put the banners up and we raised money. And then one year, the staff came to me and they said, "Can we put your picture in the banner?" And I said, "No, that doesn't sound like a good idea." And they said, "Well, can we test it at least?" So I said, "Yes, okay, test it." So they tested it. And it turned out that putting my picture in the banner raised twice as much money as the ones without. So I said, well, okay, I guess we have to do that. Then we tested a lot of other people's pictures, lots of tests, this, that, and the other. As it turned out, I still won. I raised far more money than anybody else. The click rate was maybe not the best. So the highest click rate was actually she's a PhD student from Barcelona, quite attractive girl. She got a lot of clicks, but nobody gave money. So there you go. And then finally, a couple years ago, we had a guy, he's one of our programmers on staff, Brendan, who's like a heavy metal dude, sort of long hair, kind of a rough-looking guy. And people love giving Brendan money. So he brought in as much money as me, but we kept exploring. This most recent year, they discovered really just at the last minute, just before launching, they tried some crazy banner. It was ugly. It was big and yellow and had lots of words in it. It's the exact opposite of what any advertising executive would tell you would be effective. It was too many words. It was ugly and yellow. And that one dramatically outperformed anything we had done in the past. So we used that one. And we actually were able to end the fundraiser early because we raised so much money off of that one. Now, step forward to this year, and the new thing, they just told me this a couple of weeks ago, they think we are not going to need to do a year-end fundraiser this year because what they're doing instead is they're showing ads randomly. You should see it 5 times in a year maximum, and you only see it on one page, and if you don't click on it, you don't see it again. And they have been doing this. Probably no one's seen it. No one's noticed it because it's only shown selectively 5 times a year to each IP address. And they've already raised, like $10 million in the last few months without anybody even noticing it. So we think that we're going to exceed our fundraising goal for the year without even needing an annual fundraiser, which is amazing. And I mean, it's a wonderful, they deserve a lot of praise because they've invented ways that I don't have to have my face all over Wikipedia, which always was annoying. So it's an interesting model for Wikipedia. For Wikia, the for-profit company, it's more traditional internet business model. We have display advertising, banner ads, and so forth, and that works perfectly well. It's very effective. Okay? Next question. So how do we control the content and what's published? So the interesting thing, when we think about the employees of the foundation, one of the important things to know is that essentially no one who works at the foundation has anything to do with the content on the website. The people who work at the foundation are tasked with software development, keeping the servers running, communications, legal, finance, all the traditional functions of a nonprofit. What they are not doing is supervising the editing on the website. That is all handled by the volunteer community. How does the volunteer community do that? Well, there's many, many layers to it. We have people can be elected administrators, so the community holds elections and people become administrators. Administrators have the ability to block people from editing if they're misbehaving. They can lock pages temporarily if there's a problem. And so that's a big part of it. So we get, anybody can start editing Wikipedia, but if you're not doing a good job, you'll be asked to leave. We're really quite strict with the rules. There are many different aspects. So within the community, we have something that's called a Wiki Project. A Wiki Project might be, in the English Wikipedia, we might have Wiki Project Spain. And this would be a group of people, maybe they're from Spain, maybe they're just interested in Spain, and they would get together and they would say, what are all the entries we need about Spain? They say, well, we need all the entries for all of the major politicians of Spain, the history of Spain. We need entries on every city in Spain, every town in Spain. And they'll make checklists and they'll come up with criteria to say, well, what makes a good article about a city? Well, it needs to have this, 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 and this. And they'll go through and check and try to make sure. We have rules about referencing. Everything should be sourced. So you want to have good, high-quality sources. And we're very strict about what kind of sources we accept. And that's a complicated and subtle matter. So generally, you might say, well, a blog is not a good source. And that's generally true. But sometimes it's the only source. It's the best source. If it's a blog of a politician, and the politician is giving their own opinion of something, that's a perfectly good source of what the politician thinks. So the community is fairly sophisticated about all these editorial issues, and it's an ongoing dialogue, blocking vandals, and there's a whole culture of all these very nice people that you saw who work on that kind of thing all the time. Okay. Next question. Yes?
Are you happy?
Am I happy? Yes, I'm very happy. Yes, I have a lot of fun. I just got married in October of last year, and that was really great. And yeah, it's good. Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, I'm content. Another question? Yes. Yeah, maybe for the microphone. Yeah, thank you. And I'm very happy to have a female question, because one of the things, it's related in some ways to why is it mostly men editing Wikipedia? And I think, I always joke about the main reason it's mostly men editing Wikipedia is that men feel very confident writing in an authoritative way about something they know nothing about. And in the same way, any audience anywhere around the world, the first three questions are always men. Men love to get up and say something. And so I always want to encourage more participation from women. So hello.
Actually, there are two things I'd like to say to you.
Yes.
First of all is thank you for your idea, because Wikipedia has many, many times hidden all the gaps in my knowledge, which are not few, I have to admit. So thanks for that. And secondly, you are telling me that you are able to run a company with 120 employees, apart from your volunteers, only with your fundraising?
Yes.
Okay, great for that. And now with this new business model of this advertising, what do your advertisers think about this model, which makes their 5 ads per year not noticeable at all?
Okay. So let me explain a little more clearly. So at Wikipedia, the 5 per year is a banner asking you to donate. We don't accept any external advertising at all. So no company ever has ads in Wikipedia. So it's only that. And so what do we think about having that? Well, I'm happy as long as we get enough money to run Wikipedia. And the way we set our budget is we figure out the projects we can do and how much they'll cost, and then we raise that much money. We don't try to maximize revenue. If we did try to maximize revenue, obviously we would do more than 5 banners a year. So that's good. Separately from that, I have a completely separate company, which is Wikia, the for-profit. which has about another, I think there's about 140 employees at Wikia, and a whole separate operation. So that is, I have two companies. One is the charity and one is the for-profit. And Wikia has a very traditional business model with normal advertising on every page and so forth. Sometimes I wonder if maybe it would be possible for a for-profit like Wikia to say to the users, actually, instead of having advertisements, would you like to just donate some money to the site? I think it wouldn't work. I think it wouldn't bring in nearly as much money. But who knows? Someone might try that. Okay.
Sorry, then it was my mistake because I thought those 5 banners per year were from external advertising
right.
companies.
So I'm glad you asked because it does clarify. Yes.
Okay, thank you then.
Yes, great. Okay. Next. Yes.
Have you ever thought that you charge 1 cent per visitor for yourself?
So, can you repeat the question so everyone can hear it?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I'm surprised that the Wikipedia was a foundation. I thought it was a profitable organization. And if you failed on all the other projects you had, were they supposed to be a business, normal business, or were they also based on foundations? Because, I mean, if I were you, I would think every night, imagine if I had 1 cent per every visitor. I'd be making $5 million a month.
Yes, yeah. Sorry? Oh, the microphone's fallen. Thank you. Okay. Wikipedia is the only nonprofit out of all of my failures and successes. You know, we're for-profits. It made sense to put Wikipedia in the nonprofit because it is an educational goal. It relies so much on those volunteers, and they were very passionate about wanting it to be in a nonprofit. And so I thought, well, if we can find a way to raise the money, we should do that. And we did. And just asking the users has been very successful for us. And no, I don't usually think very much about what would happen if I had $1 million, I don't know, whatever you said, $1 billion. Piles of money. I would have great, giant piles of money. No, I don't worry about it. The for-profit company is very successful, so maybe I'll make some money out of that someday. But for me, my life is unbelievably interesting. And, I sometimes say to people, there are many car dealers, for example. And I don't mean to pick on car dealers. It's a perfectly legitimate business. But I mean boring. People who make millions of dollars doing things that I would find completely boring. Whereas I get to travel all over the world and I can meet any, head of state I want, or I can do whatever I want all the time. It's a fabulous life. And so the only difference between my life and a billionaire's is basically a bigger house and a jet. I don't need a bigger house and I don't need a jet, so I'm fine. So it's great. And I do think it is interesting. Yay. So sometimes people assume or think that I'm going to be somehow anti-capitalism or anti-commerce, and I'm not at all. I think if somebody comes up with a legitimate, honest business and makes a fortune, that's great. That's innovation. There's nothing wrong with an honest business making honest money. Many of them I would find boring and not want to do myself, but I don't mind it if people do. These days, there are plenty of people, I think, who are making money in ways that I think are not honorable. Certainly, I try not to be too political and stay out of politics, but for me, if you have bankers who've run their banks into the ground to the point that they need a bailout from the government because they made so many mistakes, and they get a bailout of your money, taxpayer money, and pay themselves a bonus on the excuse that they need to keep these highly talented people there. I'm like, these are the highly talented people who ran your bank into the ground. For me, that's not capitalism. That is criminal, and it's an insult to people who do make money in, let's say, a boring but honest business like I sell cars and I have a car dealership, or I run a grocery store or some honest businesses. So anyway, I can get a little bit wound up about certain things, but I'm not anti-making money. I think people should try to make money. So this is why I can still get invited to a conference of entrepreneurs. I'm not here to tell you don't make money. I'm here to tell you make money in an honest way, in an entrepreneurial way. So, okay. Next. What? I can't quite hear.
Why the name?
Why the name Wikipedia?
Yeah.
So the name Wikipedia comes from a Hawaiian word, wiki, which means quick. And the idea is quick collaboration. So wiki it describes the software that we use. And the idea of a wiki is basically a website that anyone can edit. So it's a highly editable website. And the first wiki was invented in 1996. So 5 years before Wikipedia, no, 1995, 6 years before Wikipedia, a guy named Ward Cunningham created a website where every page had an edit link and you could change what was on the site and save it. And for 6 years, there were wikis online, not very popular. A lot of them, the owners of them, kept them hidden from search engines because they were afraid if lots of people showed up, they would destroy them and so forth. But there was this sort of small underground movement of wikis online. And I took the wiki concept and made it popular and made it, sort of well-known through Wikipedia. So that is the origin of the name. And so when Ward Cunningham, he came up with that, he was actually sitting on a bus in Hawaii. It's called a Wiki bus at the airport there. And he asked what it meant. And they said, quick. And he said, oh, quick collaboration. That's what I'm working on. So he called it Wiki software. Yeah, here.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us. I have a question. How did you manage to get back up from all those falls?
How to get back up from different failures? Well, I think a big part of it is, and this is why I talk about it so much, is if you anticipate it going in, so you're mentally prepared for it, that's important. I think there are a lot of components to it. So one of what I would consider to be one of the big myths of entrepreneurship that really causes a lot of entrepreneurs to stumble is this myth that in order to become really successful, you have a flash of genius and one brilliant idea, and then the rest just unfolds from that. And that is almost never the case. The few cases you might see it would be maybe something like Facebook. But even Facebook, if you think about Facebook as a success, there were social networks before Facebook. MySpace, Friendster, even there was one called 6 Degrees long before that. It's not like the social network concept was brand new. What did happen is that Mark Zuckerberg was able to execute in a way very effectively over a period of a few years where all of his previous social networks had stumbled in various ways. Friendster, for example, quite notoriously, they had such bad engineering that the site was overwhelmed, and people, it sometimes would take 30 seconds or a minute to load a page when it was overwhelmed, and they basically lost the market because of that. So once you get rid of this idea that it's one flash of insight and one big idea, you can understand that you can separate your ego from the business too much. If you think, oh my God, I just had a great idea. It's my life. It's my work. I know what I'm going to do. And now you start the business. If it's not working out, wow, that's crushing. This is my life. This is my work. It's not going to work. But if you think instead, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to start a business. I have a lot of different ideas. Some of them will work. Some of them won't. Some of them will be good ideas that I will screw up because I don't know how to execute it well. Some of them will be kind of mediocre ideas that might become successful because I do a really good job on it. It's not so much about that one flash of a big idea. So once you get past that, you can start to think about every day is a new day. Every day is a new project. And if you have one project and it's not working out, you can start to modify it, or you can start another side project. You can do lots of different things. And that way, each failure isn't like a huge crushing blow. But I will say, being quite open, when I think about today starting something new, when I thought about starting the Wikia search project, it was very hard because I knew if it failed, it would be very big and very public. So one of the things that's great about being a first-time entrepreneur is that if you fail, it's not going to be on the front page of a magazine, that you failed. Nobody's going to care. Nobody cares what you're doing at all. And so, therefore, it's a little bit easier. Except, maybe, your family and your friends may care, and that's important to cultivate them and make sure they're supportive and make sure they know, hey, I'm going to try this business. I hope it works. It might not work, but I'm going to give it a go. And usually you'll find that people say, oh, that's great, you should do that. And some of them will say, oh, you should get a job at a big company, and you just have to ignore them. But, yeah. Okay, next. I think.
how do you imagine Wikipedia in 5 years, 10 years' time?
Yeah, so how do I imagine Wikipedia in 5 or 10 years? So there are a few key things. So one of the things that I think is that as we see this enormous upswell of internet usage in the developing world, those people are beginning to really work on their own language versions of Wikipedia. So Wikipedia will become more diverse, language diverse. That won't affect all of us very much at all. We can be happy about it in the abstract that the Swahili Wikipedia, crosses 1 million articles. That's an amazing thing to have happen. But we won't notice it much in English and Spanish and so forth. I would say the other thing is that we're working on the visual editor. So the visual editor is, you click edit today and you see a lot of wiki markup, wiki editing codes. And it can be very intimidating. I always give the example of my father. So my father is some kind of an amateur expert on old cars. It's his great passion, is sort of the old American sports cars and so forth, and he knows an enormous amount about it, and he loves to read about it in magazines and books and Wikipedia. But if he clicks edit on something and starts to add some information, he'll find editing codes, and he's an older guy, and he will say, he's a nice person like most people, he'll say, I don't want to break anything, I'm afraid to do this because I don't know what to do. If he clicked edit and he saw something like a word processor or like his email program, something he's more familiar with, he might say, I see, I can change this, I can add this, and he might get into it. This is actually one of the reasons for the very bad gender balance in Wikipedia. And I'm always very careful how I say this. I'm not saying girls aren't good at computers. What I am saying is that the only people who can effectively edit Wikipedia today are computer programmers, computer geeks, and they are overwhelmingly male. We're cutting out a lot of people. We're cutting out my father. We're cutting out, there are a lot of people who are geeks but not computer geeks. So they're experts in some field, but they're not really super technological. So one of the big changes is this visual editor, and as a means of incorporating more people, getting more people involved in the project, and that is going to have an impact on the content in lots of ways. When we look at the overall content in Wikipedia, we do see there are some really bad holes in the content, which you might not notice if you're a tech geek like me. It looks like it's all completely done, but somebody did a casual study within the community. Somebody looked at authors who have won a major prize of some sort, and of the women authors who've won a major prize, the articles are much smaller, much shorter than for the men who've won a major prize, partly because it turns out to be true that female authors appeal to a female readership more often. It's not perfect, of course, and male authors, male readership, that overlap. Actually, we see the impact in Wikipedia. And so we think, gosh, there's some people out there who are reading high-quality literature that's not well covered in Wikipedia. We would like for them to come and help us with that. So that is, I think, going to be the biggest change. In terms of, radical change, I think as a reader, when you come in 5 or 10 years from now, it'll be very similar to what we have today. We're not going to turn into a video multimedia sort of extravaganza. Text is great for encyclopedic information, pictures. We may have some more video, but probably not a lot more. So some changes, but very much true to what it is. Yeah.
Hi, I have a question about what do you think, what is your personal opinion about the model of online newspaper, about paper use when you want to read a news, in comparison, for example, in case of Wiki News, free information, knowledge.
So newspapers, journalism, digital paper, all those kinds of issues. So I'm worried about it, but I'm optimistic. So first we'll go into what is worrisome, which everybody knows is a problem, that the newspaper industry has seen significant decline in revenue, significant decline in paper readership, which is where most of the money comes from. They've had massive increases in digital readership, but there's not much money associated with that. And so therefore, journalism has been under serious pressure. Newspapers have been under serious pressure. And where I see that as being a big problem, I always make this example. If President Obama has a press conference and there are 50 journalists in the room instead of 100, I think this doesn't matter at all. He's very well covered. That is not the issue. That news gets out. If a small town goes from having 2 journalists to 1, that is a big problem, because suddenly you've got half the coverage of local news stories, which are incredibly important. The possibilities of corruption in small town, all this it's really important, social issues and so forth. So I'm worried about it, but there's a few things that I'm optimistic about. One thing that we definitely do see is that advertising revenues are moving from print and actually from television to some extent into digital. Every year is better than the year before, so the revenues are finally coming up. We're getting more sophisticated about gathering information and presenting people with ads that are actually useful to them. And so that's helpful. A lot of it is, it's not the same story as our Wikipedia model, but it's the same kind of story that at Wikipedia, with our own internal promotions to get donations, we've, over the years, learned and we've gotten much better at it so that now we bring in more revenue with less bother. And I think we're seeing that all across the internet. People are finally figuring out how to monetize in ways that don't annoy the consumer, that actually work. And so that's helping. But also, I'm very excited in terms of journalism about the apps model. The idea that on your iPad, you can buy something that only costs €4, and that's very easy to do. In the past, if you wanted to subscribe to a newspaper online, you had to, you pull out your credit card and you type in all the information, and it's, we could see it. You send somebody to the sign-up page, and you call it a bounce. The bounce rate was enormous. People would go and they go, it's a lot of work, I'll just go somewhere else. Now, if they see something and you click one button and the purchase happens, people do it. And so we've seen this big revolution in gaming. A game like Angry Birds could not have existed 15 years ago, or it would have not been a major financial success. It became a financial success because on people's phones and on their iPads and their digital devices, it's so easy to click and buy and to spend a small amount of money. And I think the same is going to be true for magazines, for newspapers. It's not the money. People don't mind spending the money. They mind the rigmarole of the sign-up process. It's too difficult. And as that becomes easier, we're going to see more and more revenue coming in through those routes as well. I'm generally, in the long run, I'm optimistic about this, that the shift to digital will continue, but also it will continue and we will be able to re-emerge with strong, well-funded journalism. But I think it's still too early to know for sure. I'm really interested in that space. And I think it's something as citizens we should watch very carefully and be quite concerned about because it does matter to the world. Okay. More questions? Have we solved all the world's problems? Yes, here's one in the middle in the back. She's going to bring you the microphone.
Hello, I want to say you thank you. And I think one of your, I would like to know what is your opinion about, but I think one of your successful about Wikipedia is because the human capital. If Wikipedia will be with another kind of mind, should be maybe a disaster. And I'm going to do a comparison, but because it came into my mind, Leonardo da Vinci concept. He wanted that all what he invite, everybody knows it. And maybe it's because he was a very human person, but he has the possibility to have a very good culture and by himself. So I think it's one of the qualities to have a company or foundation in this case that everybody want to see and want to go into to have information. So what is your opinion about it? And my congratulations to you.
Thank you. I think if I understand what you're saying correctly, I do think that a big part of the way Wikipedia operates reflects my personality from the early days. Obviously, it has almost nothing to do with me today, because with this large of a community, I have a certain role, symbolic role in leading the community, but I'm not the editor-in-chief. I don't demand things from people. But a big part of the way the community has worked is that I like nice people, and I like friendly and intelligent conversations, and I really, even when I'm online, if I go and I see, one of my least favorite things in the world is the comments at the bottom of newspaper articles, because it's always the most angry people yelling at each other. And I just think, I just don't want any of that. Where are the nice people? Where are the people who've got something interesting to say? And yes, of course, they'll fight. I mean, we have our arguments within Wikipedia, but they tend to be in a good spirit, to say, let's argue about the content and let's not yell at each other and things like that. Not everybody can do that. But I do think that it matters, and I think that a lot of online communities do reflect the design decisions of the founder and, of course, the early team. So I think some of the, some of the ways that Facebook works, I think, wow, Facebook is really, you can see that it's from college kids trying to connect with each other. It's also useful. That doesn't mean it's not useful. It's the best way to share photos with your mom. Just get your mom on Facebook, and then, be careful what you let her see, and it's all good. But that kind of way of thinking about the world is very, sort of unique to that team of people, and others wouldn't have done it that way. So, and I think one of the things that's very interesting about online communities is that the software, the rules in the software, have such a strong impact on the way the community interacts, and yet we have a very poor understanding of that, and we've only experimented in some very small ways today. If you look at my favorite thing to dislike is newspaper comments. There's been no innovation. In the last 10 years, newspaper comments are still more or less handled the same way they always have been. And I think it's time for people to start innovating in that space, to think about how do you empower a discussion of a news article in a way that doesn't just have the loudest and angriest people shouting everyone else down. So anyway, I could talk for days about that kind of question. Yes, we have another one here.
The question is, when they talk about success in a business, they say a lot about breaking the rules or thinking out of the box or things like that. I would like to know how much of the success might have to do with common sense and humor.
Common sense and humor, yeah, I think that's right. I think so. This idea of thinking out of the box and breaking the rules is true to some extent, but in my case, starting Wikipedia and having an idea of a website anybody can edit and allowing sort of very open processes and so on, it didn't feel at the time like thinking out of the box or breaking the rules. It was just ignoring the rules, and we had a small community, and we were feeling our way forward and figuring it out as we went along. We weren't deliberately trying to be radical. We were just trying to solve a problem that was new. And trying to solve a problem with a group of people, common sense and humor is incredibly important, obviously. So I think all of these things are very important. And I also think you're getting at something very important, and I'm going to tie it into something I said earlier. Sort of think outside the box and ignore the rules. Those kinds of things, while true enough, they still, I think, tie in too closely to that idea of the one big idea. You have one big idea that's outside the box. You have one big idea that breaks all the rules, and then it all flows from that. But the truth is, you have a great idea, and it would be a complete failure unless you proceed every single day in a useful way, which is more about common sense and humor. So I think that's a very good insight. Yes.
First, I like very much Wikipedia, but I have thought Wikipedia is growing so faster, and I'm afraid that maybe one day Wikipedia will be the truth, and only one source from information is dangerous. What do you think about it?
So yeah, it's interesting. So first of all, I hope Wikipedia becomes the truth in the sense that I want it to be as good as possible and to be accurate and describe the world in an accurate and fair way. But I think that in terms of us becoming the one source of information, I think that's not really likely or possible. I mean, one of the things one of our fundamental rules in Wikipedia is no original research. So we're always pointing people to other sources. If you want to read about, I don't know who, pop culture, Madonna, right? We don't tell you anything about Madonna without also telling you where we found that out. So we have hundreds of links to other sources. And we really, always want to push people to read the original materials, the original source. We might be very popular as a simple source of the basic information, but we really rely on other sources. And then the other thing is, one of the things that's very interesting about our model is everything is under a free license. And so one of the implications of that is that anybody who wants to can go and download the entire database, load it into a website, and open up for business and say, we're competing with Wikipedia by taking all of their content, and it's called a fork in the open source world. People don't really do that because it's a lot of work and so forth, but people can, and that is an important safeguard that if the foundation ever goes off the tracks and decides that actually it should become a crusader for some particular perspective and not be fair about the content and do things that make people unhappy or start slapping ads all over the site, anything that the foundation might do that the readers don't like, someone can come and compete with us. We don't have the content under a restrictive license that prevents that. So that's very interesting. This is actually, by the way, this is true for Wikia as well. All of our communities at Wikia, they put all their content under a free license, and all of our software is open source, so anybody who wants to can take the content and leave. And we've actually had some communities do that because we do have ads on the site. We do sometimes, for business reasons, we need to change the layout of the site, and sometimes they get mad about it, and sometimes they leave. And we've had communities leave, and that's part of the cost of this open model, is that they go and compete with us. Our biggest competitors are people who came from our communities who then open up their own wikis on their own servers. They don't do it very much because it's a lot of work to run a wiki server, and we do a nice job, and we have some ads, but not too many and so forth. But for me, I like that. I like that it forces the company to always take care for the reader, take care for the editor in particular, otherwise they can leave. Whereas a lot of things like Facebook, obviously with Facebook, if people get really mad enough, they can all leave. But it's really hard to leave Facebook. All your friends are there, and they don't allow you to take all the data with you and all that sort of thing. So it's a different kind of model. So hopefully if we do a bad job, there will be competitors. And there are a couple. One in English is Conservapedia, which is a conservative view of the world. It's quite hilarious, I'm afraid to report. It's sort of really kind of strange, but I'm glad they're trying it. I think it's unfortunate. When it first started, I thought, well, that might be good to have a very thoughtful, conservative perspective on the world. Could be useful. It could be useful for the conservative movement in the U.S. to help weed out some of the insanity. It turns out it's all about the insanity, so it didn't help. So anyway. Okay. More questions? Yeah? We're finished? Okay. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Muy bien, pues hemos llegado al final del evento. Agradeceros vuestra presencia aquí. Espero que os haya sido útil, que hayáis sacado ideas para poner en práctica. Solo con eso, si cada uno de los que estamos aquí hemos sacado una idea, una referencia que nos puede servir, pues con eso estamos más que satisfechos desde Vodafone. Recordaros, en Emprendo con Vodafone tenéis toda la información sobre la iniciativa, tenéis también los contenidos que se han compartido hoy aquí, y nada más. Muchas gracias y hasta la vista.